Hello and welcome. In this video, I want to talk more about the entity framework and why we need to use it if we want to work with the database in the MVC website design. Now, let's dig in. Till now, we talked about how to work with the MVC structure using the routing, the controller, and the view. And also we learned many great tips and tricks. But there is other part in the MVC structure that is really important. And it is using the model and the database. For better understanding, if I take a look inside the Google, then inside the Google, search the fire. After a couple of seconds, you have all of these results and we have different options and the websites over here. So where is the location for saving all of this? Indeed, designing the website without using the database is not possible. So if you want to design the real world projects and the websites, you need to use the databases. So you can easily get access to the databases and the images like this. And also if I take a look in the Microsoft.com, as you see over here, I have some text here, the image and all the links up to the end. We can easily design all of this, then save them back in the database and load it in your website. So all of these are saved inside the databases from the top to the bottom. And we call them as the dynamic website. So the database is really important part of the web design. To do that, we need to learn how to work with the databases in the MVC project. So if you want to work with the database, you have different options. If I take a look over here, you can easily start working with the AD.NET or the entity framework. So let's talk more about these technologies for working with the databases. Suppose I have the database. This is my database. So I have the application or the website and I have the database. The first option is using the AD.NET technology. So the AD.NET is the connector between your database and your application or the website. This method is the old one and we have the control over anything while we want to work with the database in the application. But you need to learn a lot of tips and tricks, the methods, the codes, the queries, and you need to use a lot of components to get access to the database. Despite of the AD.NET, we have another technology or the framework, and it is the entity framework. In the entity framework, we have the database and the application that we want to use the database inside it or the website. Then we have the AD.NET technology, but we don't need to work with the AD.NET technology or the framework directly. Instead of that, we have the entity framework at the top of the AD.NET. So the entity framework is another layer or the technology at the top of the AD.NET to get access to the database quickly and easily. So in the entity framework, we don't need to learn a lot. We don't need to write the codes a lot. All of this done by the entity framework. So in the entity framework, most of the operations to get access to the data or save them back is done by the entity framework automatically. So we don't need to work directly with the AD.NET. Instead of the AD.NET, we need to use the entity framework, its methods and the codes inside it. So the entity framework is really simple to use and we don't need to learn a lot. And also we can use the scaffolding tools to generate most of the codes to get access to the database. So if you wanna work with the database easily and quickly with the minimum codes and the effort, then the entity framework is great for you. And if you have the professional programmer and if you want to write anything from scratch manually and if you want to have more control over the database, then you can use the AD.NET. So what is my own option? Based on the project, personally I prefer to use the entity framework or the AD.NET. And in most of the projects, the entity framework is great technology and we don't need to spend a lot of time to get access to the database. So the entity framework is one of the most common and the most famous technologies to work with the databases. Okay, excellent. I enjoyed a lot. Now we learned more about the different technologies for working with the databases. But what about the next step? In the next step, I'm going to talk more about the entity framework structure for deeper understanding. So stay with me. Thanks for your time. Welcome back. In this video, I will quickly talk about the structure of the entity framework in the MVC core websites. So let's begin. First, we talked about why we need to learn the entity framework and its usage. In this video, let's take a deeper look inside the structure of the entity framework. It's really simple and straightforward. Suppose I'm over here, I'm really happy that I can start working with the MVC and the entity framework technology. So I'm happy and I'm going to get inside the google.com and the result is something like this, the cat. And after clicking on the search or pressing the enter, I have all of these options over here. Let's take a deeper look inside the overall steps and the procedure. To do that, let's go over here, open up this. After writing the cat in the google.com and pressing the enter, my request is sent to the routing system of the Google. And the routing system, based on the request, selects the appropriate controller. And the controller, as I mentioned, is responsible to get access to the database and also communicating with the view. So the controller want to search the cat inside the database of the Google. And this is the really big database of the Google company. So we have the entity framework over here as the connector between the database and the controller. So let's take a deeper look inside the entity framework. The main part and the heart of the entity framework is the DB context. Also, we have one or more models. Indeed, each model is a kind of the table inside the database. So the model is inside my application, and in most of the cases, for each table inside the database, we have the appropriate model. So we have one or more models based on the tables inside my database. Then we have the DB context over here. That's the connector between the database and my models. Indeed, the controller uses the DB context to load the data inside the models, then send it to the view easily and quickly. And finally, the controller sends the view as the response to my user. In this example, it is me. So the DB context is the connector between the database, load the data and read the data and put it inside the model 1 up to the end. In this example, I have only one model. So this is my model, and the DB context load the data from the database inside the model and send it to the controller, and the controller send it to the view. Or we can get access to the models directly inside the view. But loading the data is done by the DB context. Saving the data back inside the database is done by the DB context. So the DB context is really important part of the entity framework. Okay, I enjoyed a lot, and this was the quick tour about the entity framework structure. Okay, excellent. Now we learned more about the entity framework structure. And what about the next step? In the next step, I'm going to talk how we can start designing and creating our first database application or the website using the MVC core and the entity framework. It's time consuming, so stay with me. Thanks for your time.